Good afternoon, my name is Jackson Mayer, and today I'm going to be reviewing Mike's exercise session for KPE282's Assignment 2. To start things off with some general feedback, Mike's effort was absolutely phenomenal throughout the entire thing. They were working on supersets with a lot of work and not a lot of rest. It wasn't rep-oriented, it was more time-oriented with 45 seconds on, 30 seconds on, etc. And he worked the entire time. He was very focused, and one thing that I really liked about the way that he was working out is that he was very kept to himself. He wasn't social with everybody. He wasn't talking to people during his sets. He was making sure that he was doing the right movements and making sure that everything was okay. And you love to see that in the gym because it means that they're focused and they're working on themselves. They're trying to better themselves. And it's clear he's been doing this for a long time. He's a little bit older. He's a little bit larger, and he just wants to better himself. And you love to see it. So good for him on that part. He did 5 exercises that we could see and that were recorded. So I'm going to be reviewing each of them. We've got a push-up, an inverted row. He did the Versa climber, and then he did single arm bench and bent over rows with dumbbells. For each of them, I'm going to be giving what I observed as a constraint for him, and then a constraint that I may add to that to either make the exercise more difficult, maybe make sure he's focused on some movement patterns, things like that. So to start with the push-up, his constraint was kind of hard to determine. It's clear that he's been doing this for a very long time. He powered through for the entire 30 seconds that he was working. He didn't really stop at all, so the constraint that I'd give him was his leader. He was pushing him the entire time, saying, come on, Mike, you got this, just a few more seconds, just a few more reps, things like that. So that was his constraint. That was what was pushing him to keep going. One thing that I would add for him is something to make it more difficult, because it was clear that he was, it was a little bit too easy for him. So what I would add for this just normal push-up, maybe you could throw his hands a little closer together, make them a tricep push-up, something like that. Or maybe throw his feet up on one of those boxes that he was doing the push-ups next to. That would definitely add an incline to his push-up and make it a little bit more difficult. And maybe, be suited to his needs, because he's got a big chest, and it's clearly he was, having a breeze. It wasn't that difficult. When it came to the Versa climber, it was a little obvious that he was going a little slower than the other guys. He's a little older, so it's fine. He just wanted to make sure he was getting all the right strides. One thing that I noticed though is when he got tired, they did the Versa a few times, and in the latter times that they were using it, when he was going, so the Versa climber moves like this. One thing that I noticed is when he was getting tired, he would kind of lean to one side and sort of try and shorten the distance he was having to go. And the problem with that is the lateral bend in the spine can cause some issues, can cause some injuries even, and you really want to avoid that. So the constraint that I would give him for this is just to really engage your core while you're doing it, so that you're going straight up and down, really making sure that there's no lateral bend and no injuries are going to happen. After the Versa, he did the inverted row, and he was having a lot of trouble with the inverted row. And my constraint for this is just because he's straight up gassed. He did 30 seconds of push-ups, and like I said, he didn't stop at all. It was right at the beginning of the workout. Right after that, he did 30 seconds of Versa, and that's really difficult. We do that on the football team all the time, and I can tell you from experience, it's really tough on the body. It's a full body exercise, and you are gassed after it. So 30 seconds of that is going to be brutal. And right after, having to go to an inverted row, really tough. His hips were down, and you could tell he was he was putting his effort in, yes, but he was obviously tired and really just going through the motions, and you don't like to see that. So one thing that I'd like him to do is make sure that his shoulders are down and back, because he was kind of just lax like this and just pulling, and that's a lot of arm activation. And in inverted row, you really want a lot of back activation. That's what the exercise is. So if you pull your shoulders back, pull your shoulders down, and just really just focus on keeping them in the same spot the entire time, you're going to pull through your back, and you're going to work on those muscles like they're intended. After that 3 exercise superset, they moved upstairs and they were working on a single arm bench and bent over rows with dumbbells. So for the bench, like I said, for the push-ups, this guy is a pretty big guy. He's been doing this for a while. He's got a big chest, so it wasn't very difficult for him. So again, we're going back to the leader. The leader knows that he can do this, and he was using a weight that he was comfortable with so that he could go with a full 45 seconds with no issues. So the leader was really pushing him. He was on his ass the entire time, making sure that form was okay, making sure that he was going through the full range of motion necessary for the single arm bench, making sure his core is engaged. You like to see that from a leader. One thing that I would add for him is to keep his feet planted. One thing that I noticed throughout the entire thing is that he had an issue with them kind of coming off the ground. and you don't want that to happen. So really just plant them. You'll get good leg drive when you do that, and it'll just make the exercise easier. And last but not least, we have the bent over row. It was the same dumbbell that he used for the bench press, so a little bit lighter weight. But one thing that I noticed is when he was finishing the rep, he was rotating his spine, and you don't want to do that. So the constraint that I would add for him would be to imagine that there's a dowel on your back, something that we've done in class, and really just make sure that everything is straight. So once again, his constraint was that he was rotating a little bit, and you really don't want that, and that his constraint that I would add for him is to imagine that there's a dowel or balancing a tennis ball on your back, just making sure that it's straight, making sure everything is in line, your hips, your shoulders, everything is perfect. And yeah, it was a great workout all in all. He did a fantastic job, and these are just some pointers that I'd give him. Thank you for your time. Take it easy.